So we are going to begin with a little kind of opening ceremony. Today here in the UK, it is May Day, and Christof hosted an event last summer where we did some work with the ley lines in the UK, the Michael and the Mary lines, and they run very close, like literally just up the road there. We have the Mary line coming through, and in the ancient times in the UK, on May Day morning, people would gather all along sacred sites along the Michael and Mary line, and they would light fires. As each site saw the first rays of dawn, the dawn sunshine, they would light a fire to greet the dawn. And it is this evening here in the UK, and it's very much morning for you in New Zealand. But I thought it might be nice just to start with creating a bit of a field, syncing our intentions, and lighting a candle to honour this very special time of the year. So if you are sitting or lying down, please just take a moment to land now with this session. Feeling your bum on the seat, maybe your back on the bed, wherever you find yourself right now. Become aware of the support of the earth. And this is a time when people all around the world would gather to celebrate our beloved earth. And I believe we are gathering for conversations like this at this time because our earth is inviting us to step into our true greatness, to help her heal, to do our own healing, and to become something perhaps we could never have imagined together. And as you become aware of the support of the earth, connecting in with your heart, and imagine your heart now actually opening, like as if the petals of a rose are opening, so to imagine your heart opening, its field becoming larger. And my highest hope is that you take from this conversation whatever you need for your own awakening journey right now. And as you sit connecting with your heart, just become aware of perhaps an intention for this call, this conversation. What would you really love to learn? What would you love to discover? And in a moment, Christof and I are going to light a candle to honor the May Day celebrations. And you don't have to do the same, but you could also just imagine yourself an inner spark lighting within you, lighting up your heart. So I take my candle, and my intention for this call is that all those who listen, either now live or whenever they are engaging with the replay, that they receive the same wisdom, joy, and deep love from Brother Christof and from the field that we create together. As I have over the years in getting to know Christof and getting to see him walk his path and being lucky enough to receive his support in walking my path with greater fullness, greater joy, greater love. And I really hope and wish those things for you: greater joy, greater fullness, greater love, as I light my candle.
I light my candle as a beacon of light, the great hope that humanity will move through our collective slumber, through our dark night of the soul, and we can eloquently and elegantly move through to greater illumination, for it's only the illumination within that will create the transcendence on the out. Aho.
Oh.
Well, George, there's no one better in the world more qualified to give this dialogue together than you, my dear brother, because it was you who was at the very beginnings of my transition from the health and fitness industry into the healing arts. And I think that we had come together at the Youth Leadership Summit that Greg Secker had put on with Harry Singer, and we came together, we met there, And that I think was about the starting point where I decided to leave health and fitness and to go full-time in the healing arts. I just finished my 4-year apprenticeship, I would call it, at the Barbara Brennan School of Healing. And I was about to enter into shamanism, into the Shamanic Path. So you've seen probably this great metamorphosis from this being that you first met to where I am today. So you've definitely seen all the trials and tribulations in terms of the transitions, maybe not so much the deeper stories, which you're probably going to extract from me today. So I'm so happy we're here to share this.
I'm really looking forward to that as well, because I think you're absolutely right. I recall perhaps the second we were at 2 leadership summits together. And I've got to say a big up to Brother Harry Singer. In this time, we are called to be servant leaders, and I really judged that he did that wonderfully in serving the young people of those summits.
Oh my goodness, he's been a real role model for both of us, and just selfless service for young people. And I'm taking some inspiration from that now that I've landed in New Zealand to set something up in New Zealand for young people. I think it would be wonderful.
And I think the second of those summits, you said you were heading off to the Amazon. And I think you mentioned there was some Mayan crystal or something you were going to be doing some ceremonial work around. And so, yeah, I remember thinking, wow, that's definitely long-term. That's the kind of work I see myself connecting into. So that journey into the Amazon, you say you'd been doing this amazing work in the Barbara Brennan School, and I've been lucky enough under your tutelage to learn some of that. What was it that drew you there? Because we see that the kind of ayahuasca journey has become, on some levels, I feel like there's some misunderstanding around it. It's become a bit of a kind of quote unquote tourist destination, but you and I both know it's a gift of the very highest frequency to humankind, and to be treated with the utmost love and reverence. So what was it that what was the catalyst that got you heading to the Amazon?
Yes. So I think there has to be a catalyst before that, one must have as a deep longing inside yourself to evolve, right? To become the best version of yourself. Yeah. No one can give it to you. You have to claim it. You have to want it. You have to have a drive that's there for you to make this the most epic adventure ever of life. And you can't just sit back and expect it to happen to you, right? That's what happens when life happens to you. You have to want to really consciously imprint your intent on existence rather than allow existence to imprint an intent on you. And to have that, there has to be this little internal fire that is the drive to want to improve your conditions.
Yeah.
And so I think I've always been blessed to kind of have that. I know that some people don't, and they kind of get stuck. And so that fire has always been there. And then strangely enough, while, I have got a strong work ethic, I'm inherently a little bit lazy in terms of I like to find the fastest, most direct method to get the result I'm looking for. And that kind of drove me in the training arts, where I would develop processes and protocols for my clients to get them the fastest result possible. I was one of the first beings probably in the fitness industry to start working with cleansing, rather than traditional stock standard, food guidelines, and then just notice the blitzing of weight off people. That's where I became popular as a coach and conditioner. I was just getting fast results. So the allure of kind of the medicine journey was alluring for the fact that I might be able to, cut 5 years off my development time. So there was a little bit of that. There was a little bit of a session I had with a mystic in Ireland. And, through my awakening period, my awakening started, I think, way back in 99, when I first started to come into contact with some beautiful spiritual books. Started to, we all go through this process where you have to go through a differentiation from your family. You grow up in that kind of your family unit, and you have to, at some point, find yourself outside of kind of your postcode, right? So, you grow up in the culture of the family, and then I went to college, And I just continuated it from college, into kind of my first few years working as a trainer. But then I took about a year out, and you got to have that space of kind of finding yourself. And that was the first. And then I started to open up to some things, and it kind of went on the back burner, came back around again. And then it started to knock louder and louder, this calling to be more than just my mind. Because I was, we'll go into probably my layers of conditioning at some point, but I was really broken. I was seemingly have it together on the outside, but very discombobulated from within, almost like a plastic robot, just like going through life because my heart was so disconnected from myself and my feelings. So I knew there was more. And then the journeys and steps to, the mystic, I saw, she looked into my hands and said, "Oh, you've got musical hands." And I went, "Oh, okay, it's interesting," because I'm just starting to bring music back again. And she says, "You've got healing hands." And she says, "Shamanism for you will be like putting on a glove. And it will be just like the most natural thing you've ever done because you've had many lifetimes as a shaman." And I kind of went, "Oh, that's interesting." And so it kind of seeded there. And then kind of this, the ultimate form of shamanism, of course, is working kind of with medicines and ayahuasca. And I'd heard of ayahuasca, and iboga have both formulated, incredible, powerful pathways of my awakening and my transcendence of the shadow states, the patriarchy, the reptilian kind of conditioning, into the more, graceful, streamed frequencies that I hold today. And, I was severely conditioned, so I had to take a lot of medicine. and I first heard about it through a girlfriend at the time. I was with Linda, and she was following Tiara Kumara from Children of the Sun. Yeah. And I was exposed to her through that. And then it came about that, she had formulated this camp at Casa Shipibo. And she was going to take 5 groups. And Tiara, if you ever catch this, I don't know how you managed to do 5 groups in 1 year. You are a legend. Oh, my goodness. Couldn't imagine taking 5 groups in a year. My goodness. But Linda and I applied, and we both got in. Oh, great. But then we subsequently broke up, and it was like, oh, shit, okay. And so there's no way you want to go through the Amazon with kind of someone you've broken up with. So, it's hard enough going through with your partner sometimes. So I said to her, "Listen, you go ahead and do that, and I'll pay for that. And this will kind of be a beautiful kind of, conclusion, and it'll create a separation in our paths." It sort of went on reasonable terms. And I, confounded myself to the fact I wasn't going to go. And Tiara at that point, I think, was only going to do 4 trips. But then, as that year progressed, and I believe it was 2012, Tiara's name kept coming back into my awareness, and it wouldn't go away. And so I just ignored it for maybe 2-3 weeks, and it was still there. And then I just went, I need to reach out to her. So I reached out to her and checked, and she said, "Yes, I'm going to take another group. So wonderful. Would you like to come?" I said, "Absolutely." So I ended up going to Casa Shipibo and got my ass handed to me. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness gracious me. I never experienced such a thing. And it was my first, I'd done iboga, and that was, its own story, which we may go into, but ayahuasca. And so if those of you who haven't taken this plant medicine before, what it is, it's kind of 2 kind of plants, ayahuasca and chacruna, and they come together, and they allow kind of large amounts of DMT to come into your system. The chacruna is the light, the ayahuasca is the chacruna is the intelligence, the ayahuasca is the spirit, and then the chacruna contains MAO inhibitors. And so the shamans in the forest and Huni, in this generation, this lineage going back thousands of years, the plants, because they're so connected to the forest and the jungle, we're able to talk to them. And that's where they're able to work out, of all the thousands of plants in the forest, you combine these two. These two combined make the magic. So I remember, sitting there wondering what was all going to happen in my first ceremony. And I think the first ceremony was kind of like a taste. You don't take so much. And kind of just getting our feet wet a little bit. But what happens with DMT normally only gets released the moment you're born, so that the corridor of consciousness can open, and your soul and your consciousness, which is overlighting the in the womb of the developing baby, comes into the baby. And then that DMT is still open quite for a little while, and you're opening this birthing portal, and you've had children, George, so you know that's a very magical ceremonial container. Yeah. That there's magic and alchemy in that. And that's as that consciousness is coming in, and you know, we can have a whole nother conversation about lotus births and that consciousness anchoring into the from the placenta into the baby, and the benefit of keeping those two together for as long as possible. And then at death, you know, as you die, you know, the MAO starts to drop away, and the DMT, which is already in your cells, gets released, and your consciousness can navigate out. So what it does when you take these medicines and various elixirs and other substances that allow this, is that your consciousness, you know, goes through what we might call the death experience, whereby your consciousness is able to leave your body, and you're able to experience yourself in more multi-dimensions of consciousness, realms and realities. So you've got access to more pockets of yourself. And because ayahuasca is also, you know, a master teacher herself, she's kind of also a spirit. So she's very prevalent and present in the ceremony, providing for you very often very direct teachings and revelations. And, you know, you need to be a little bit skilled in the path of decoding kind of messages. And this is where a lot of people get lost. And this is why you need good Western facilitation, because as good as the indigenous shamans can be, they don't necessarily understand the Western mind and can comprehend and translate the experiences. And this is where the whole kind of birth of the Neo-Shamanic Society started, was to want to create kind of centered, straight, heart-based facilitators who can deeply ground in and provide context for people. But, you know, because of my background, had already done quite a lot of work on myself, I was able to translate messages and get a lot of revelational insight and a lot of purging. I mean, yeah, I could just, when I was vomiting, I could just feel this, all this like reptilian kind of programming coming out. You know, like my father was very holding a strong patriarchy kind of energy and consciousness, and that was kind of really deeply embedded into our house. And it was just this incredible, just, you know, purging, just this, all this shit coming out of my system. Just I could feel it like, you know, coming out. And I just was so happy to be able to purge, right? Because I knew that this stuff was no longer going to be inside me. So when people think that ayahuasca is going to be a holiday, it's very far from a holiday. It's usually quite an ass kicking, but it's very usually deeply profound, and it can save a lot of time. So, you know, I remember in one of the ceremonies, and that first time I went, you know, with Tiara, and Tiara said to me, and I think the 4 years training I'd done at the Brennan School stood me in very good stead, because, you know, Barbara said to us that, you know, I don't want you to take plant medicines during this time, right? And I wanted to honor that. And I really understand why, because it provides strong foundations without it. You know, everything is capable without plant medicines. It's not everyone's path, but it was my path. And so when I went there, I was very, very well able to navigate, because I was energetically intelligent. I had developed a strong foundation of skill set of energetic intelligence to navigate myself. So I was able to make profound use of the time. And Tiara said to me, I've never seen someone go so fast as what you're going during this process. And one of the ceremonies I remember, I had just extraordinary Kundalini Awakening, where the Kundalini, which is the serpent, energetic serpent in your coccyx, burst open. And that kind of flood of light intelligence went up my spine, up to my head, over to my crown. And I was just completely so highly sensitized. And so that ceremony came to a conclusion, but I was just beginning my ceremony. So everyone left the temple, and I was kind of still in the temple space. And I was just taken on this brutal journey with this high, you know, it was just like if anyone touched me, it would like seem like electricity up my spine. And for those of you that have had a Kundalini Awakening, you know what that means. And then I was just taken through all this kind of just darkness and density of what's going on in the world, all the abuse of women, just showing the most darkest kind of stuff. And I was just like transmuting it and going through this kind of brutal journey all night till about 5 in the morning. And then right towards the end, I was then finding myself pregnant, and I was giving birth. And I was through this process of just this extraordinary birth and bearing down. And as I was bearing down, birthing, I birthed out and I looked, and it wasn't a baby, and it was a planet. I was birthing an Earth. I was birthing this kind of, new Earth. And then I was just like, having to process all that, but I was so exhausted. I remember I had to get one of the Shipibo workers the next morning as daylight was coming up to escort me back and hold my hand to get me back to my casita, and then ask him to take me back down to the river. And those of you that have been to Casa Shipibo with us know that it's not a long walk, but it's, maybe 5 or 7 minutes. It took me 40 minutes to walk down to the end and jump into the river to bathe and kind of cleanse kind of everything off, and just to sort of come back. And right then I knew that who was the boss. It was certainly not me. It was ayahuasca. So it was, and then, 2 more very, very deep ceremonies. And going through that, it took me, and that's what I say to people: if you're going to go to the Amazon, and Alea and I, we would like to go back and take a group back again. She's just burst through something herself to have a new relationship, I think, with ayahuasca. Is that it takes probably a year to integrate that work, because you're going so deeply with the medicine. So it takes a long time to really embed in, because what happens is that your frequency jumps up so high, and the realizations and the deep purging of old programming conditioning is that your frequency, energy, and consciousness is no longer the same being.
Yeah.
But that new being has to step back into the old world, right, that you created. Yeah. And it no longer makes sense. So therefore, you have to take the time. It takes that year to actually take that realization and frequency, energy, and consciousness and move through what you've heard me talk about before as no man's land. That gap between your old life and the new life, holding the vision and the frequency of the new life, but it doesn't yet exist, and you're in that gap. So you have to walk on with kind of faith and trust and knowing that, kind of, if I keep moving forward, I'm going to get there. And this led into...
I've just lost your audio there. I just lost your audio a second there. You said this led into... Yeah, you could...
Am I back?
Yeah. So you said this led into...
This led into kind of the 2012, and those of you that were kind of following all these timelines, the Mayan calendar, 21st of December 2012, that was November 2012. And then I stayed with Tiara in Cusco, and we had a month together there. It was so much fun.
Wow. And
we were guided into being on Machu Picchu on the 21st of December, doing a San Pedro ceremony. And this was an extraordinary experience because, much of the work that Tiara was doing at the time was gathering up the light workers and kind of doing this beautiful planetary global transmissions that she was doing to work on the crystalline grids, to anchor in and crystallize the crystalline grids, which was going to anchor in on the 21st of December, which it did. And we were on Machu Picchu, and we were like flying on San Pedro. So funny. But look, all these tourists were going around the place, and there's tourists, and the tour guides were going blah, 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 blah. And all the people were missing this kind of incredible energy and frequency that was coming through. And we were just in front of the temple on Machu Picchu, shaking with so much energy and consciousness just ripping through our system, just marveling at the beauty of everything that was transpired, and knowing that many light workers around the world were all anchoring in sacred sites and kind of anchoring in this crystalline, because this was a time period where the sun and the earth were full time in the kind of, photon band, where the plasma frequency has got the fast energies. And I think at that point, many people probably thought that was when the shift was going to happen. But actually, it's turning out 2020 is the year. This is the shift that we're in now. This is the shift that we're thinking that was going to happen then. We can all feel it kind of crumbling and moving and moving into the next round. But all of that experience and all of that journey was really the starting thrust for me to catalyze into where I am now. It was really kind of like, before that it was enrolling in the healing school, 4 years there, then to that. And then at that point, after going through all of that experience, including Peru, making the life choice, I am going to quit full-time health and fitness industry, which, I had a good life in that. I was, traveling the world almost full-time, speaking at probably 30, 40 countries over the last 3 years at conferences, and all of a sudden I just disappeared off the scene. And I just said, the only way I'm going to be able to put these skills to work I've been learning is to actually stop doing everything else that's distracting me and kind of, entering into it full time. And that was really the key decision point, to make, that, I'm going to go full time into the healing arts.
Yeah.
And if any of you are watching, you have to make that decision at some point where you have to leave behind, everything that you've built up. And you have to die to the old, and that dying to the old has to kind of, allowed to let go. And if you want, George, I can share the story how my name evolution kind of happened the next year. But that key point was, I'm going to just forget everything else that I've ever created in that world and commit myself to the healing arts, because there's so much magic here. And I didn't know how to begin, didn't know how to start. And the decision I made was, I'm going to start by writing a blog once a week. And that was it. That was a decision. I'll commit once a week to writing a newsletter. And then over time, people were interested in the message, and slowly but surely more people began to gather. And it starts as simple as that, like your decision to do the Sovereign Human Show. Just one simple decision like that changes everything. And it starts this unfathomable wheel in motion that you can't even imagine years down the line. And so today I find myself at the very place that I imagined back in 2013. Loving wife, beautiful family, children, home, serving the world in a nice way, traveling, being of service in the healing arts, and it's all kind of there. But it's the genesis of that starts with that commitment, to work on oneself and then to take the plunge and fully commit. And that was the genesis really of the shamanic healing arts, and then kind of the galactic shamanism that came as a result of taking many groups back to the Amazon twice a year for 5, 6, 7 years, was taking groups back there and, navigating the higher dimensions on ayahuasca and being able to have profound insights and abilities and all of these things that came about through I would call it the training ground of the Casa Shapiba camp, where I was able to fully flourish as a shaman and to bring my true essence into the signature of the ceremonies. And then, now we don't do so many ceremonies. It was more prevalent in our life then, but all of that magic was created in the Amazon. And so I'm always grateful to Huni, Casa Shapiba Tiara, for setting up the camp, beloved ayahuasca for sharing with me so many gifts. We have a beautiful relationship, and I look forward to return to her at some point with a group of others that wish to come and navigate the higher realms.
Nice.
So
one of the things I want to make sure that the listeners get before we kind of carry on is, you mentioned a few times this idea that you had to really kind of transcend and integrate the shadow states. And so I guess I want to make sure that people understand from your perspective what you're talking about there and why it's such an important part of the awakening journey.
That's a great question. All of that we do, and George, you've been exposed to this. You've been to the neo-shamanic training, and everything. All the gains are made in life through accessing the shadows. The shadow states are the parts of ourselves we don't like to look at and acknowledge, but are playing out and creating and affecting our reality. So the first thing I think in the path of awakening is taking 100% responsibility for our creation. But you might say, oh, Christof, but so this and this happened to me when I was a child. I got abused by my father, or I had physical abuse, or I was kind of sexually abused, or I was all of this. How can you say that, that there was, all part of my own creation? Well, it's affected me today. Well, when you look past the operation of 3D in linear time and you move more into a full scope of consciousness to recognize that, at some level, you chose this incarnation knowing this would come for the purposes of learning. And most likely, this was a karmic consequence of past life choices where you broke natural law and were a perpetrator in another life. Yeah. And then this life came in holding victim to balance and learn the kind of opposite end of the polarity that you set in motion that broke natural law. Prime Creator created this matrix in such a beautiful, precise way for the checks and balances of learning of soul growth. And when you take responsibility that everything in my life I'm experiencing right now is inside of me, even the people who are coming up to me, where I think that this person's taking advantage of me, I've got abusers in my life, we are creating that because we hold the frequency inside of us. So when I was able to accept that, and it takes a little while to accept that, I'm actually creating everything here, everything's my creation. Whatever you look to see in your life that's not going right for you, that can improve, you don't try to improve it by going to the kind of the outside and trying to change it. Right? When you understand that you have to flip it, you have to go inside to change the outside, everything shifts. Yeah. And so when I began to learn about energy and vibration and consciousness, and I recognized that the gains I was making by investing my time into energy medicine and to energy healing, I was getting such big yields. I was getting big kind of breakthroughs in my life. Everything was slowly starting to become more harmonized, more loving, more connected, because I was very fragmented. And so fragmentation from our conditioning and upbringing and my family upbringing, and then traumas with my mother's illness and sickness and her passing on, and then traumas in relationship as I got older, where I was, learned not to trust the feminine and made contracts with myself to not trust the feminine again because of betrayals. Yeah. Deep betrayals. I remember one of my big betrayals, and the big thing I had to work on was coming into harmony with women and females again, and not using them as kind of as more pleasure seeking kind of vehicles, but really coming into a greater love, harmony, and respect. I had to go back into kind of the betrayals of relationships and had to really navigate those, and had to pull out the woundings, and had to transcend a lot of the patriarchy that I had inherited from my father. And so the only way you can do that is to have loving people around you who can mirror and reflect back kind of, shadow states. And so this is why relationships, and certainly people get a little bit excited about this whole kind of twin flame or twin ray relationships. Well, here's the honest truth about that, because Alea and I are our complements to each other, is that it's like not the easiest relationship in the beginning when you're dealing with your shadows, because your twin perfectly mirrors your kind of shadows, which you don't like to look at. And of course, then there's, you're like projection onto them and projection back. And quite often people have this fantasy about a twin flame relationship. And, if you're not sure what a twin flame is, it's just simply a soul that you have, descended from the Godhead from, and then split in consciousness. So when you come back into reuniting again, there's a great, memory and resonance there, but there's also a great reflection point. And so it's like this kind of cauldron and container of kind of growth, if you allow it. And so when we came together, there was this incredible acceleration as well. And so Alea and I have grown kind of enormously together because of our commitment to each other and love for each other's deep foundational love, which has formed the alchemy container to hold space for each other, to allow each other to grow. And through these shadow states is that the shadow, and we all have them, and we all have them. So we're trying to kind of navigate through them. They sit as these wounds in the field, and a wound is kind of like this trapped energy consciousness. And really one of my big ones was that betrayal with my girlfriend, who I found out 1 week after my mother's funeral was having an affair for about 6 months through the whole process of my mother's death. So in one go, I lost my mother, and I lost my girlfriend I was very in love with. So I just collapsed. and then went into kind of binge drinking and drugs when I was living in Sydney, and became kind of like a quite the party animal for a while, which was fun at the time to dive into hedonism, but it was taking me further and further off my path.
Yeah.
And and I just knew that I was lost, and I kind of had this enormous energetically shielding, this big massive shield over my chest, just to kind of couldn't feel my heart, just was just living completely in the head, completely in ego, but I was earning great money because I was a successful personal trainer in Sydney, working in the city. Sydney's very glamorized, so I was very in that scene. But it was not fulfilling at a soul level. But at that point, I wasn't even aware of what a soul was. Maybe I was kind of so in the 3D. But that wounding kind of was really a deep, and the patriarchal energy and consciousness was really kind of putting me in this whole kind of forcing kind of current. I was very like, forceful, kind of making everything happen, taking lots of drugs, alcohol, having lots of sex, kind of, just all over the place on that side of things. But deeply kind of I knew things weren't quite right. And my first glimpse of kind of something else was actually coming down off a big party one time in Sydney. I'd taken ecstasy, and I was coming down, and it's not that I recommend doing this at all, but I was lying in bed. And I was kind of, I had two moments like this in my life. And this was the first one whereby I was showing kind of love in the angelic realms. And I was like coming down, I was in this kind of sleepy state. And then I could feel myself being taken. And there was these beings around me, and they were saying, why are you taking drugs and trying to artificially give yourself love when love is who you are? And I said, what do you mean? Come with us. We're going to show you who you really are and show you what you really are. And I went, oh, okay. And then just let go, because I was in that kind of like come down state. And they took me up. And slowly these beings started to come around me. And there was just like this love started to fill me up. Love, love, love. And then all of a sudden I was there where they wanted to take me, and all these angelic beings just started to come all around me. And there was so much love. The intensity was like 1,000 suns of love that was just so intense. I almost couldn't handle it. Just that amount of love that was actually there. And they said to me very clearly, this is your birthright in whom you are. You don't need anything external in order to experience this. And then they took me back down. I was left kind of to integrate all of that kind of, state, and I was going, wow. And I would love to say that, oh yes, this was the catalyst and I turned my life around, but it's not true. I stayed partying for another 2 or 3 years, but the memory always kind of was seeded, and it kind of stayed with me
life was never, from that point, you can't unsee or unexperience what you experienced there. So even if you carried on for a couple of years, that seed was always there.
You can't undo what's always been done. When you have that experience. The second experience I had like that was when I was in the health and fitness industry, and I had a crazy schedule. I went over to Soccer-X in Brazil, and I had done 2 conferences before that, and I went over to Soccer-X in Brazil, went to the Rio event, flew back to England, was in England for 3 or 4 more days, and then flew straight to Kuwait for a fitness conference where I was speaking at. When I got to Kuwait, I came off the plane and I was completely whacked. I didn't know what had hit me, but I felt like 70 years old. And so I was feverish. Something was going on in my system, and I was at this conference. And I just couldn't deal with the conference. I had to stay in my room, and I began losing weight and I couldn't sleep at nighttime. And in the night, not being able to sleep, it's tough for a night. It's more tougher for 2, but 3, 4, 5 nights, it was brutal. I was just like ravaged with no sleep, and I was sweating. Every time I had to, every 2 hours, I had to change my sheets on my bed. Just like I lost weight. I lost about 10 kg, and I didn't have a lot of weight to lose. It was like skin and bone. And I had to get myself out of my deathbed and kind of give my talk, which was average, but I got through it. And then, couldn't really participate. But then one of the last nights, still not sleeping for 4 nights, I just kind of let go. I was just like, oh my goodness, I'm asking for anything from the spirit realms or anything to please come and help me. I was just at that point of desperation. And then kind of like a spirit guide came, and an angelic being. And I'm just going, wow. And then they performed this beautiful healing on me. And immediately my shaking body from the fever began to, for the first time, began to relax. And it was almost like I had an alien in my head that was talking to me all night, just being in my mind, kind of like tuning so I couldn't be still. And for the first time, my body let go and the fever began to drop away and my mind became still with this beautiful angelic healing, and all the beings started to come and surround me again like that other experience and surround me with love and just give me the guidance that I'm, I need to now move on my path, and find my way. And the beautiful healing that you're receiving is all around you all the time. So was that kind of, I was able to finally calm down, the fever broke, I was able to start turning myself around, got some help and medication wise, get some drips into me at the hospital and started to kind of get myself around. But those two kind of experiences give you something that, what I always call the direct experience. That kind of, the direct experience is something that one must have. You have to have direct experience in life. And this is why what religion has done is created intermediaries between people and God through the priest classes. And it's prevented people from having their own direct experience. And so that is really what the path of the Gnostics is. And that's kind of the priest wisdom that I hold, is that sort of Gnostic traditions. But those sort of direct experiences provide the catalysts for you to be, for me anyway, to begin searching and exploring. And this was really that motivation to, it wasn't a harder jump for me then to imagine that, there's energy and frequency, but then there's consciousness fields, there's spirits inside of all of that. And how do we keep evolving? And it really served as core faith, I guess, in the divine. And that core faith was seated there to be able to allow me to trust and to know in ceremony what I'm doing is effective, right? Because I don't have vision, right? So I'm kind of like this ninja samurai these days. That's kind of like Nick Nolte in that movie, right, where he's completely blind and operating. But I have good psychics around me these days who see, and Leia's like a bloodhound; she can sense out anything. But at that point, it was really gave me the faith and the depth of knowing through direct experience that there are more profound things than what our mind can comprehend.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so coming back to the shadows, definitely the patriarchy, definitely the forcing currents, and then, just in life, observing myself from a higher perspective and getting feedback. And, of course, many of you are aware that the second time I went to the Amazon, beloved Akasha, who's now come to be Sananda, was there. We formed a beautiful relationship, and it kind of helps, when you've got a young kind of liberated conscious master living with you, and he came and lived with us for a while. We helped him integrate his liberation, because he liberated his consciousness at 23. And so now he's holding an ascended and liberated consciousness. But then, so he was really there helping to hold space for Alea and I when we were going through our things, and we really helped each other so much. He's really just so instrumental in our life. And he was kind of, someone who was able to keep providing beautiful, gentle reflections of the shadow states, help me work through things. So I've had really good kind of support, and working through the shadows, I don't know how many plant medicine ceremonies I've done with iboga and ayahuasca. It's definitely over a couple hundred combined, and the elixirs. I mean, it's a lot. Where for the first many years, when I was taking groups to the Amazon, I would also, at least one ceremony, when everything was quiet, I would nick over to Funi and go, okay, more medicine, fill me up. And I would go and hammer myself with ayahuasca. And then I would just be particulated. I'd purge, and I would just keep going through that process. And I don't feel I need to do that so much now. Yeah. I feel that there's still shadows that come up every so often. There was one that came up a couple of weeks ago, and just during some things going on in the field regarding betrayal, where I was perceiving something that was happening in the field through the eyes of betrayal, which made me necessarily misinterpret or misperceive something that necessarily wasn't coming from that angle. And so it made me make a kind of little mistake in terms of feeling betrayed from someone when necessarily the intention was not there on that. It was an unknown action that person had taken, but I perceived it as betrayal. So when I now in this state, when I see and sense something like that, this is real medicine, right? And it's a gift, because when the shadow comes up, oh my goodness, I've got something to work on. That's awesome, right? So I was able to get healing on this. I was able to get massive amounts of clearings on it, and I was able to transcend it and then move past it, because that betrayal energy, because I've been perpetrators and on the other side of it, I don't want to have around anymore, but there must have been some little betrayal wounding still there for me to perceive this as betrayal when it actually maybe intentionally was not, even though the physical thing was something was taken from me, but it wasn't intentional. I perceived it as such. So therefore I must have the wound, and then clearing that work. So the path that I'm holding and I'm sharing with you and other students that come on the Neo-Shamanic Society is about coming into personal responsibility and facing the shadows, acknowledging where there's glitches in your life and dealing with it direct and coming into it. Because when you remove the shadow, when you remove the wound, there's a little trapped piece of your consciousness which is separated from yourself. And in this trapped piece of consciousness here, that's the wound, that's the pain. And across that pain body, there's the energy which pushes back all energy to come into that, so that there's no like vibration will come into contact with this wound. And so your defenses prevent you from articulating and moving the frequency through so much. And so the shadow work allows you to go into the wound, re-experience the original pain, and remove this from your system. And as you do, pieces of your soul essence come back, like a little soul retrieval comes back, and you end up shining more of your light. And that is really the path of transcendence, is not chasing the light, but entering into the darkness of the shadow. And it's kind of like going into a cave, right? You go into it, you can't see to start with, and your eyes climatize, but you have to go deep into the cave to get there. And that's really what this work is about, the shadow walker. And really, a lot of what Alea and I do in live events and experiences, and indeed in the Neo-Shamanic Society, where people want to learn from us, is the shadow work. That is where the big gains in your life will come. You will transcend something, and suddenly you will enter at a new frequency, and your brain and your reticular activating system is no longer perceiving things in the same way. There's no core belief being held in place. The belief dissolves, and from the field, new quantum potentials can exist and come towards you, and you end up alchemizing a new level of reality. Alea and I have just recently, in the last months, from our experience in Mexico and from other things that we've been doing, have hit a new level of our kind of life experience through this process of clearing ancestral levels of my own family lineage, and clearing into new levels of reality that serves now as a new platform and a new level of operating for us to be of service in the world. So the work never ends. And, even ascended masters are still working on themselves, because from once you actually ascend and you're out of your physical vessel and you're still holding light, you can then evolve into being a planet, right? Because the earth is a consciousness, right? And she's evolving. She's moved and evolved from earth up into Tara, her consciousness stationed at dimensions 4, 5, and 6. And then she's moving from that up into Gaia, dimensions 7, 8, and 9. And our trajectory in this golden age is to have the potentiality for our planet to evolve into Aramentana, which has never happened before, which is dimensions 10, 11, 12. So, if you think you're done when you ascend, well, then you ascend into being a planet, right? And that's like the Sanat Kumara consciousness, who holds that consciousness of the entire planet. And then consciousness expands into being a solar system, and then a galaxy. Right, so each of a galaxy has its a Milky Way galaxy has a consciousness field. So we're here as humans, attempting to navigate through our human stuff and these levels of initiation. But there's much more beyond all that, also.
So one thing I want to reflect for the listeners, as you grab a drink and things, is one of the themes that seems to have emerged from our conversation is that the gold is really found almost in the opposite place you might expect to look for it. So it's like, I heard you say that if you really want to go far, it's not about reaching up for the light and the light. It's no, go down, do the shadow work, right? And I also heard that you said before that we don't have a body that creates an energy field. We have an energy field that creates a body. So I wonder if we can use that flip to give the listeners a bit of context for the energy healing work that you were doing with Barbara Brennan, because I know there's some people listening / watching who don't have any pain in their body anymore because of some bits you did with them way back at some of those youth leadership summits. Shout out to Harry Price on that one, who you did some work on his back, no back pain ever since. So that was where you really made a stir at the youth leadership summits by the healing skills you brought. And the impact of those is still being felt today. So I feel it'd be important for the listeners to get a sense of that healing work that you said yourself gave such a strong foundation to what came afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, that was like at the Brennan School, I learned really great energetic foundations. And these skills then ended up evolving into something else because I went into shamanism. So it's a very different style of working. But, it's almost like, when you go to college, you study something, right? You become a lawyer, but you don't really learn about being a lawyer until you are a lawyer, right? Because you don't, it's like me, I got physical education degree, which is all theory. And, most of the people at college are fake teachers because they've never actually done it, right? They're all like teaching from theoretical perspective. So then you actually have to go into the real world. And, I had to learn to be a trainer, and everything they taught me at college was nonsense. Right? It was all like backwards. It was all upside down. I had to like find out from trial and error myself, all of that. But the Brennan School, what it did is it kind of gave me the foundations to prepare. And then from there, I ended up evolving foundation skills into the shamanic tools and skills I have today, but the foundations were laid. And the healing skills and like, people talk about Reiki and things like that. And I did Reiki. Reiki is taking one stream of energy consciousness and moving it through the body. Well, there's a much higher level of skill sets that are also available. And these are more like skill sets like a surgeon. It's like moving from a general practitioner into a surgeon. And so I developed those surgical skills in there and then developed them further and moved particular core things I was doing into different realms. And if anyone is looking for a healer, you won't go far wrong by looking up the Barbara Brennan School and looking for a graduate. It's a very thorough program, 4 years. It's kind of very depth and detailed. And it gave me a lot of inspiration for the start and journey point we're on now with the Neo-Shamanic Society. Do I want to create a healing modality that is kind of, massively easily accessible? And while now I'm, starting to teach some remote healing work, and that's scooping up a lot more people. Ultimately, you need to go deep. And this is what you need to do with your life and consciousness, because, you start to recognize that you are an energy field that's creating a body. All right. When that flips in your realization, I know that was a key point for you, George, when I mentioned that, you went, oh my God, right? That's like, and totally, it's like completely turned everything upside down, right? Because, you've got these different levels of the field, and just go and buy Barbara Brennan's books. She's got a very good foundation of the work, and you can learn about the different levels of the field, and that creates the physical. But then in your chakras, in most of the work is the lower 3 energy centers. Certainly for people who are spiritually evolved, awake, light workers, they're often chasing the light, but you're going in the wrong direction. You have to go down. And that means focusing on these lower 3 energy centers. And then I hear the very common reply, but I've done so much work on myself. Honestly, people have no idea how much work needs to get done. Okay, you start looking at consciousness from the perspective, okay, I need to clear ancestral karma. Okay, so let's take myself, my ancestral lineage back 25 generations. You need to start cleaning up all those past life choices they made not in alignment with divine right order, not in alignment with natural law, and you have to clean all that karma, right, as a starting point. Let alone your own life, which is how many thousands of incarnations you've had, and every time you have, moved out of natural law, you've created karma. And so, you're here in this lifetime to balance all of that. So take thousands of lifetimes of yourself with karmic consequences. Then you take kind of all those ancestors' lifetimes, through that genetic lineage you came through, which the genome has progressively gone further backwards. You take the interferences in the genome. You take kind of soul level, all the various contracts and all the past lifetimes with soulmates that have created this kind of cluttering of energy, frequency, and consciousness. And then you take external interferences and trackings going on in the higher dimensions. Light workers in particular, I find, and this is not being, this is just an observation, that there's kind of like often a little bit of ego around how much work they've done, but they're literally scratching the surface and capping themselves because they refuse to look into the lower centers. And so it's like kind of attempting to build the castle of your dreams without getting strong foundations in place.
Yeah.
The foundations are the lower energy centers, where the grounding, where the connectedness, and many people who are awake are following their soul needs, right? And this is the great, the two things that you go through on a journey, right? Is you have to overcome egoic deficiencies. So if you don't have the level of kind of financial abundance, or you don't have the level of kind of, harmony in relationship, you don't have the kind of level of purpose and connectedness and service in the world, you may have all the direction in the world, but until you can ground it and you can anchor it and you can bring it into the physical, you've still got work to do, right? So, and there's no sense like hiding behind denial and saying, oh yes, but I'm so spiritual. You can get caught in the false light matrix, which is just all bliss and rainbows. You need to take a reality pill that actually we're here to live in this physical world. So you have to start to master the physical plane. So that means you have to ground in and start to take an honest look at why your life isn't kind of at the level that you can hit. And it's because of these deficiencies that are in the egoic deficiencies of those lower energy centers. Because otherwise your life would already be at the level you want it to be at, right? And so there's always more, because then if you're here for a purpose, well, that you're here to influence a lot of people to make a big shift and change. You have to turn yourself into the person that can hold all that. And I like that beautiful saying that it's a great ambition to become a millionaire, not for the money, but for the person you have to become to hold the money, to hold the consciousness of it, right? And wanting to acquire money and finances is not a bad objective, because then you can be more influential in the world. So if you don't have that level of financial abundance, then there's work to do in the shadow states to then be able to bring yourself into that frequency and field of wealth consciousness, so that you can then, hold a container that is going to be more kind of influential in the world. And, that's kind of that journey that we have to take, because if we don't work on the lower centers, and we're still working through this. We've got more levels and layers of influence that we want to hit in the world, and I feel I'm just scratching the surface of my potential. Yeah. And Alea's potential. It's just like we're just at the very beginnings of what we feel is a tipping point, where much more is going to start coming. And there's that beautiful saying that all is given to those that give all, but you have to give all to yourself, and so in order to be selfless, you have to be a bit selfish sometimes. You have to go within, you have to work on yourself. And that is the fundamental core to, transcending and working through these core issues. And the core issues are relatively around the first energy center, safety and survival. When you lose the fear of death, and you know that you're an eternal consciousness that cannot die, you lose all of the kind of perceptions of fear of what's going on in the world right now. And this is what people are coming into, the fear of survival, right? And this kind of survival consciousness is really where the planet is coming up for purging and clearing. Yeah. And if you're feeling fear, anxiety about your safety and survival, there's more work to do on the soul level regarding kind of your existential eternal self and state. And so that the feelings of safety and survival prevent you from taking risks into the unknown. It prevents you from following your heart. So, you have to really, work through all of those, because otherwise you don't feel safe in the unknown. And then everything changes for you when you feel safe in the unknown. You can take risks, you can follow your heart, you know that you're eternal, and whatever's going in the world won't hurt my consciousness. And then, that second energy center around community, connection, belonging, distorted sexuality, which I held for a long time. I've just looking more at sex rather than love, and looking women as objects of pleasure. And, growing up in that sort of family where my father was definitely the, king of the household, and my mother was subservient to all of that, which, then created that own kind of relationship entanglement and sickness that my mother ended up holding, and getting sickness in her womb and getting sickness in the ovaries and breast cancer from that big patriarchal lens, and then having to dissolve all of that, and then having to create more community connection, belonging from the creational centers of the second energy center, and then the third, which is all around our ability to have good, strong self-esteem, self-concept, and being able to move in a direction of life and not care what other people think, and not managing our life through trying to manage and navigate other people's perceptions of us, because our self-esteem needs to have them think highly of us in order to feel good about ourselves. So these are all kind of core foundational pieces. And then karma, right? Ancestral karma in particular, which holds and anchors in place, because you have to liberate your genetics. And that's what spiritual growth is about. Liberating your genetics. And when you liberate your genetics, like Sananda's done, I haven't achieved it yet, I'm working towards that. You liberate, all the generations forward and back in time. You liberate their consciousness, so they don't have to keep coming back to Earth for more lessons. So it's like this, very, very important facing oneself in the lower energy centers, because if you avoid it, you are missing spiritual growth, real spiritual growth. And I wrote a good article, a blog about that on my website and my blog about real spiritual growth and all the shadow states that can come up during that. But, as you know, George, in your own experience, my own experience with my shadows, they're still around. They still come up, still get triggered from time to time. And then I accept them as gifts, because then I know that's where the great gains will come, and I'll suddenly elevate to a new level of consciousness, and my life will continue to harmonize into greater influence.
So there's a couple of bits like from that I really would love to dig on a bit. How are you doing for time, by the way?
I'm okay. I know I really have to check with Alea. Saturday morning, you're doing a topic? Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're good.
I reckon maybe I've got kind of a couple of bits I'd love to just, because we haven't touched too much on, you mentioned beloved Sananda there. And so that felt like a real, you'd kind of put some very strong foundation pieces in place. And then, certainly when I saw you delivering that first Divine Keys program, that felt like a real launching point for you. So I'd love to, get a sense of what, and I know you shared a little bit before to me about, you really took some steps in faith around that time of stepping into the healing arts. And
the Divine Keys was instrumental to that. I love this program, the Divine Keys. It's kind of my life's work, basically. Everything I'd learned, I started to try to cultivate and put together. And I think the first and it's always evolving, the keys. But the first evolution was 2013, and it really, this was a real catalyst to this, because around that time, I was really inquiring and looking for my beloved, right? I was calling her in and, holding space and whatnot. And I thought that I was going to go to America in 2013. And I went to go back there because I just spent 12 weeks and I got denied entry because I'd done 12 weeks there. And I did one workshop that I wasn't supposed to have done, apparently. I didn't realize you weren't allowed to do workshops after a conference. So anyway, I got denied entry. Then I go, oh, now what? Where am I going to go? So I had to really tune into myself. And then Ibiza kept coming in, right? And then okay, Ibiza. And I loved Ibiza because I was, when I was into my hedonistic days, I was kicking the shit out of Ibiza like all the good clubbers and whatnot there for many years, going twice a year and having a wonderful time. Did that for a few years, definitely ticked that box. And so, at this point, I'd stopped drinking. I'd delve with the deep shadow of alcohol, of addiction in my family lineage. If you could write a list of different things you could be addicted to, I think I would pretty much be on every one of those lists, right? So a very, very deep iboga session I did, focused on addiction, pulled it. And the the key one was alcohol, because alcohol started a whole process of faulty decision making, right? Taking me off center. And just as a little segue into that session of Iboga, it was tough. You know, it was deep, and the gentleman who was giving us the session was giving us a lot of wood, and we'd been doing a lot of Iboga sessions. We all thought we're quite strong with Iboga, you know, and so we were all saying, yes, I'll have some more, please. And then he does the switcheroonie, because he gave us kind of Iboga, you know, keep going round and round and round, did about 6 rounds, and he said, oh, I've got some different Iboga, a different type. We'd like some more. And, you know, what he didn't tell us was that this stuff was much, much older as a tree, and it was much more powerful. So he basically just took us down, and then he gave us the daddy, and we just went woof. And then it came this like ferocious vomit that I'll never forget, because it felt like my chest was being exploded open. It's kind of ones that make your eyes water for 10 minutes. And I was just vomited out, power vomit, alcoholism I was showing alcoholism on my father's line and alcoholism in my mother's line. So there's big purges out through those ancestral lineages. And I came back down, I was just lying down, and I was deep, deep, deep. And then I got this voice, and it was very clear to me. It was so powerful. It said, it's like my higher self giving me a very soon talk, but it was God, right? God saying to me, and this was the starting point of really the one decision I made that changed everything, was this one. If you give up your life and believe in me, if you give up alcohol and believe in me, I'll give you a life you won't believe. And I was like, wow. So you mean there's a trade on, I'm trading with God right now, that there's a trade on the table. In order to walk this path, and everything I have now essentially can be stemmed back from that kind of core decision. Okay. And you know what? And so am I prepared to give up alcohol and have everything I've ever dreamed for in my life? It was a no-brainer. Yes, I'll do it. Right. And then of course that first year you're tested, but alcohol, the Iboga took out all the longing for it. So I was like, wasn't really interested. So that really kind of started this kind of whole, that was the core. But now coming back to that kind of thing in Ibiza where the Divine Keys got started, and the start of kind of working with groups. I arrived at Ibiza from Colombia, and I just kind of, you know, gone through my last of my kind of, I did an ayahuasca session. I don't want to turn up to Ibiza in kind of March. It's a bit shit because it's like winter. I'm going to wait till May. So I just hung out. I was in Colombia, hanging out there. And then I came to Ibiza. But I had, you know, strong intention to meet my beloved. 4 days later, I meet Alea at an event. Okay. Oh my goodness. And then, you know, 3 or 4 days later, I kind of get a house to live in, like a villa. And at the time, it basically drained all my money. It was about 10,000 euros, which I only had about 12 or 13 at the time, to basically get into that house, right, into Ibiza, to get into it. And I had a choice point to make. Another choice point was, do I play it safe and get an apartment for about maybe 600 to 800 a month? Or do I take the plunge and commit to 2,500 a month and, you know, have a place where I feel I can be more kind of creative, right? It was a nice place. We had kind of a pool, a nice lawn, and, you know, it was a great first landing spot. Again, I took the plunge, and I said, okay, we'll take this one. And actually, Alea ended up moving in first because her living arrangements changed, and she couldn't stay where she was going to stay. And I said to her, okay, well, you're either going to go find somewhere else to live, and then in 6 months' time, if we end up making it work, you're going to come and move in here, or you can move in straight away, and we can just like jump into the hotbed. Not that the bed was hot. It was kind of weird, hotbed in terms of like, you know, our own internal shit that was kind of coming up for clearings, right? We had to like work through so many layers. So basically within a week, suddenly I'd gone from being free and kind of, all around the world to living in one spot with this woman I just met. And so all this shit come up. And then I'm sitting in this house, I'm going, okay, well, how am I going to come up with 2,500 euros a month for this house? You know, doing individual healing sessions is not going to work, right? And I'd graduated the Brennan School by then. I had some healing skills, so I'm not going to do healing. The only way for me to really work this out is I'm going to have to do something online that allows me to reach more people and touch more lives. And I'm going to have to do it in a way that allows me to leverage my time. And so making a decision not to go face-to-face healing, but to go kind of into the internet, into remote healing, into changed everything. Because when you work out that you can do healings on people remotely, and I'm taking 100 students through this at the moment online, teaching them remote healing skills. And what's wonderful about that is you can then let go of your physical location and start to build your kind of personal brand and identity online, and create a website and start to create that and start to work. So no matter where you move around the world, you know, you're always, your personal brand follows and your web portal follows, and you can always be of service. Your client base keeps building. And then, you know, the breakthrough was when, you know what, I'm going to do a webinar. I'm going to like do an online teaching to see if a group of people would like to come on a coaching journey. And then and basically my own path was one of following the divine keys, you know, from being centeredness, you know, from being centered, I mastered hara. I wanted to really get hara. And then purity was allowed to bring through all of my kind of teachings in health and fitness. And then stability, creativity, stability, creativity, identity, love, expression, insight, and knowing are all portals of inquiry into the chakras. So it was just kind of more of a mainstream way to get there. But the catalyst was, I remember we had 20 people on my first webinar. It was very exciting for me. You know, and nowadays we just did a webinar, had 2,000 people register. So it's kind of, you know, it's the progression. You have to start somewhere. So I started, and I had 20 people on the call. And I managed to convey a message in, you know, a rather convoluted way, because I wasn't as elegant probably as now, but 8 people signed up to go on this divine keys journey. And that investment they each made, you know, covered like, you know, 2 months rent. And it was me delivering the session for 2 or 3 hours once a week for 12 weeks. So basically I covered rent for 2 or 3 months. And I'd got kind of, and then it wasn't just the teachings, it was the energy transmissions. And when I worked out that you could do healing work for groups of people at the same time, I was away. And so the Divine Keys was really what I might call a signature program. Yeah. And one of the first things I like to teach healing students is you need to develop a signature program, a journey that you can take people on that then allows you to do the healing work for the group, but personal process as well. Identify the shadows and do the clearing work. And that was my start. That was my start in the healing arts in a meaningful way, where I was able to, you know, start working with people and having a program that was designed. At that point, it was very unsophisticated. I just taught it live on the call, and then at the end of the call did the healings. And today I have all the videos already done, so they study all that, and I just get them together for the Zoom calls. At the moment, I have you know, a Divine Keys group, still working that program, much more evolved, much more, you know, beautifully presented and packaged, but it's, you know, it's still the foundation of what I do.
Beautiful. And I think that again, the thing that I really take from that is your step in faith. That you know, there's been 2 things. You said numbers. You left the training arts and you closed the door on it. So there was no kind of going back. You had to make this new healing arts life work. And then with the villa, you created a problem that you had to solve to, you know, who's the person you want to become so that you can afford the villa rather than the safety of the apartment.
Exactly. You have to make a decision from who you're going to be, not from where you are. And this is why when you do your vision, you have to vision who you're going to be, and then you make your decisions from that point. Not what I do is I imagine myself being at a level of success that I envisage myself to be. Then I create a website that kind of creates that kind of image for myself. And so my website becomes my vision board. And I'm going through the process of doing it again. I'm working with Beloved Cosmic again, and we're kind of like, I'm creating a new brand identity so I can go a little bit more mainstream and hit another level. So what I'm doing for this process is I'm envisaging where I'm going to be in 3 to 4 or 5 years' time. And I'm creating from that space and making my decisions from that space. So no matter where you are in your own journey, remember the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Started for me with that villa in Ibiza, and before that. But, every time you're tested about faith, and we were tested again recently. We had to buy a house when we didn't have necessarily the money for it. So we had to kind of take the commitment to say yes, and then trust that what we were going to do in the time we created for ourselves to finish getting it sorted was going to come. And, it's coming. It's kind of, it's the faith that you always have to hold. And a level higher than faith you will get to on this journey, and this is kind of what I hold now, is knowing. That's that kind of knowing that it already exists. And here's the key. If it's in your heart, it is God telling you that it already exists for you. And so that is God saying to you, that is your higher self telling you that this already exists. You just have to have the faith and the trust and the belief, but most importantly, the knowing that it already exists for you. If it's in your heart, it wouldn't be in your heart unless it was there for you. And you just have to turn yourself into the person that you need to become in order to hold the frequency, energy, and consciousness to create the attractor fields. And then through the lens of coherence, you end up through magnetization, attracting it towards you, and you end up manifesting it.
Beautiful. Yeah. So I think to kind of finish with, because of course I met you when you weren't Christof.
Exactly.
So what I feel like is you've had, particularly, I heard you say that you have to stop caring what other people think. You've had to leave the kind of the tribal assumptions of the family unit as well. And in all of those things, it seems, are embodied in your decision to step into a new name. And we
great question, George. This is like really,
so
and there's been many like linchpins.
Yeah, we're at a point of as a species of stepping into a new world, and for many of us that will mean leaving old lives behind. So I have a feeling that in the story of how you stepped into your new name and really embodied it, had that faith in it, there's probably some gold for our listeners as well. So I'd love to finish perhaps with that story. Yeah,
beautiful story. Christof, it was not my given first name. It's my middle name, Christopher. My first name and last name was something else before I grew into this consciousness and claimed the true essence of who I am from a spiritual perspective, the consciousness that was eternal, the who I am beyond the lens of the physical, because we grow up with a strong identity of the physical, but it's not necessarily who we truly are. It's the label our parents gave us and what we came through as in that genetic line. So this story starts in the Amazon jungle. The second time I went back in 2013. And I went back because Tiara, because of the healing skills I had, asked me if I would come back and co-facilitate with her. And I said, hell yes, this would be awesome. I'd love to do that. That was a no-brainer. And so we set all this up. And then there were two kind of luminaries I want to give a shout out to who were there on that trip. We had Skip was there, and Akasha, who wasn't Akasha then, he was in his birth name. So how Akasha found out about it was that he was in his kind of physical life then, and he in meditation got the name of the website to look up, and he said, you have to leave your current job and you need to go on a journey, and this is where you need to go first. So he looks up the website and he found out about the trip. Okay, and so he finds out about the trip, and then he comes and he's in the jungle. And then I knew there was something special about this kid because he was like unbelievable. He's very gifted. And anyway, because he's gifted, he's got very good access to kind of other planes of dimensions. And he was the first one. He said to me, do you know who you really are? And I looked at him. I went, oh, this will be interesting. I said, no. He said, you are one of the, you are a Melchizedek. You're one of the 36, embodied priest kings that are coming. And I went to him. I said, are you sure you've got the right bloke? I didn't believe it. I said, that's nonsense. And we keep going through our ceremonies and whatnot, and then in the last day, he says to me, okay, the Order of Melchizedek have a message for you. And I went, oh yeah. They know that you are a little bit quite uncertain about this. And so what they've said to me to tell you is that they're going to give you a dream tonight. And, and I went, wow, okay, to confirm that this is true. If you've ever been told that you're going to have a dream that's a prophecy, right? It's actually hard to get into the dream state, right? So I'm back at Iquitos afterwards, and I'm like going through sleep, trying to sleep, and it's just a dream. I'm waiting for the dream, right? Waiting for a message. And of course, the message never comes because I'm not in the right state. And I'm exhausted because of all the things we've been through in the Amazon. I finally start dozing off about 5 a.m, and I finally get into a dream state. And then there's a few dreams, but not the one. And suddenly I'm in the dream. And I'm in this really nice, lush hotel lobby bar. And I'm sure they gave me that dream because, I used to be quite the wanker and like all that type of stuff. And, high-end cocktail bars and lounges and all of that. So anyway, I'm in this very familiar place in my old life. And I'm talking to this gentleman who's got long hair, and we're sitting at the bar, and we are having a high-level conversation about a very important gathering coming up of dignitaries that are coming together, and we're going to have this like a meeting, like a council meeting. We get it all set and lined up, and then he leaves the bar where we're at, and he walks off. I take a little sip of my drink, I put it back down, and I turn my head to look at the door, leave the door, and he's got this long kind of gold cape. No, silver cape it was, with a giant M sequenced on the back of the cape. And I just wake up, oh, Melchizedek, it's bloody true. So that was kind of this inception of that. Oh my goodness. And I sort of went, oh my God, now what? And from that point, it took me 2 years to drop into acceptance that, okay, what would be I've had a lot of resistance to stepping into changing the name. What will my father think? Oh my God, he's going to be so different. His name is not going to be carried forward. What will other people think? That people think I'm completely crazy. I've just spent X amount of dollars on this nice website for my old name. I'm going to have to let go of I have to let go of all the videos I've ever done because I've got my name on the credits. I'm going to have to change it. Oh my God. So anyway, that held with me for probably a year or two until I think it was 2014 where we landed in Ibiza. And then Alea came with me, and then Sananda, 4 weeks after Alea and I met, I kind of said to Akasha needed to come and sort of stabilize and integrate his big expansions. And I said to Alea, oh, do you mind if I've got this young man who really needs to come and stay with us? Do you mind if one of my dear friends and brothers comes to stay with us for 3 months? So not only is she going out with me, she's going out with one of my best friends. So she really was amazing to say yes, and so the three of us were kind of together. But anyway, during that process when he was here and she was there supporting me, that's when I made the commitment to change my name into it and accept the responsibility, because it's not a name you can take. It's a name that's only given, and it's basically linked to my lineage of the Melchizedek order to hold there was obviously there's a couple of lineages to this. There's a fallen lineage and an ascended lineage, and I'm here to bridge back the ascended lineage and to rewrite the fallen of that patriarchy that kind of fell, and then to bridge it through into the crystal star server, the new cosmic Christ consciousness field. So I'm part of my consciousness is part of the changeover team that is helping transition humanity from the old server, which was the Melchizedek consciousness, which was broadcasting the frequency, energy, and consciousness to the planet, to the new one, which is the crystal star consciousness field, which is coming through to the planet. And I've been mapping over the old geometry to the new geometry and kind of bringing through the new consciousness into the earth grids that has been here. And so since I took that name, all the synchronicity, all the flow has started to come, and I've stepped into who I truly am. And all my physical vessel is is a lens of awareness and focus for my consciousness, for my eternal consciousness, that now, as I have claimed who I am in the spiritual dimension, allows the unimpeded flow and instruction of that consciousness to perform its purpose here on the planet through our container. And I'm just getting out the way of where that consciousness is guiding us, and follow the guidance step by step into the where we're supposed to be.
Wonderful. And again, there's that thing of, you've accepted who you are in the spiritual dimensions, and now the fullness of who you can embody here on this physical plane can come through. So it's another one of those little flips that seems to have occurred as well.
And then, it can only come through because of the shadow work of the lower three energy centers. Otherwise, you're trying to bring kind of an enormous kind of field of consciousness into a tiny little funnel, because you're not wide enough in the lower centers. You need to have a big stream coming through, the whole thing that's not being blocked in the lower energy centers and constricted, because you can't ground it. So, I think one of the things that people appreciate, and I certainly get feedback from, is just how, while I'm holding a lot of, advanced spiritual knowledge or teachings, how grounded I am. It comes across very grounded. That's because of that shadow work. It's not floaty kind of, cotton wool kind of spirituality. It's kind of, gritty kind of real world, embody who you are as a spirit, but make it work in the real world approach. That's the key.
Nice. So, to finish with, brother, I wonder if you'd be kind of, just to let people know a couple of things. In a moment, like how they can find you, how they can engage with some of the things you can offer. But one of the things we've really kind of focused on here, we've seen how valuable to your journey, your awakening, your expansion has been this shadow work. And for those who maybe haven't got, well, none of us have at the moment, access to fly out to the Amazon or anything to perhaps work with some plant teachers, how can they perhaps spot when shadows might be playing out in their lives? How can they start to become aware of this shadow world and start to maybe do something about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first thing is to know where your center is. And that part of this is knowing Hara, knowing how to be kind of in Hara. Just to give you a little example, I'm mostly in Hara as my default, but let me come out of Hara, for a moment and move more into my auric field. I hold auric field as well, but let me hold the auric field without Hara. So now I'm in the auric field. So I'm kind of like, you can feel me as being a little bit more kind of floaty and not as kind of connected, right? And now if I come back to Hara, I'm both connected and in my Hara and aura, right? And so Hara is intentionality, is really about building that field of intent. So you hold that. When you get pulled out of your center and you have kind of anxiety, frustration, anger, upset, kind of these emotions that are coming in your system, and you're processing, so-and-so said this, and it's kind of all this, you're processing. And you're processing because there's a shadow at play. There's a wound underneath that has created a layer. That wound has created been formulated from an unmet need. Right. That unmet need has been layered into your energy centers, or your programming portals of perception that have been programmed to perceive things in this way to protect the wound. Then on top of that, you have a belief, then you have your thoughts and feelings. So your thoughts and feelings, when they become discordant, give you an indicator that underneath that, in the depth of the wound, there's a wound that you are protecting. And so what you end up doing is that you end up tracking when you get pulled out of center by frustration, anxiety, worry, guilt, kind of any of these thought emotions. And then you start to use this process where you can reverse engineer them. You go, if I'm thinking this, what must I believe? That's the first thing. These thoughts and feelings are showing me something about this situation. This person's triggering me. What must I believe about myself in order for that to even have an effect on me? Because if I didn't have this belief, they wouldn't affect me. Oh, I have a belief. And using that example of betrayal, oh, I've been betrayed. Oh, betrayal is a thing. What's underneath that is a wounding. And so underneath that, you start to do the deeper work. And this is where really you need to work with skilled healers. Such as yourself, George. You've been trained to work with kind of this constellation, and they're able to kind of, help people heal through it. and you provide the healing context, you do need people in your life to support you. You need to get your own healing team around you. We've got our healing team we still go to in this day, you know, and you've probably got yours. You need those around you who can hold you in your shadows to reflect back to you what's really going on, and then find the healing team to be able to provide the healing work to clear it. And any investment you make in yourself in terms of finances to do that will be repaid at least 10 times into the new level that you will get to, and the new clarity that you will have, the new perceptions and the new grace that you can sail through. And what happens is that the same trigger will then be presented again to you as your final examination. The universe will provide one more test, the universal intelligent field, just to make sure you've passed that examination. And the same thing will come up through a different person who will present with you the same kind of potential to be triggered. But this time, because you've cleared the wound, you're going to have space. So you're going to have space rather than enter into an automatic reaction. You're going to just be able to observe and see it coming and choose a new response. And in the choosing of that new response, your neural nets will start to create a new neural pathway that you then will start to groove. And you start grooving that new neural pathway so that in your subconscious mind, you make a new association with that same stimuli and place it into a new neural pathway, which creates a new response and a new action in your life. And that's how you keep kind of evolving through.
Beautiful. And I absolutely love that, because for me, one of the ultimate definitions of sovereignty is the shift from reaction to response. So where you're being triggered, you haven't done the shadow work, you're reacting to the world. When you're embodying your sovereignty, you have the capacity to respond to life rather than react to it. Yeah. So thank you for really embedding that teaching for people. Really appreciate it. So to finish with, brother, where can people connect with you? And, you know, what would be a great, you know, you shared a huge amount, and I hope people have got the sense that we have literally scratched the surface. You know, Brother Christof used the words galactic shaman. We have scratched the surface of some of the kind of higher picture knowledge that this brother holds. So what would be a great first step for people to take with you, and how could they do that?
Yeah, it's a great question, George, and thank you. The best thing is to go to my website, christof.love, and then christof.love, and then just opt in into the homepage. There's like a free gift or just the ability to opt in. And then I send you something called the morning ritual. And the morning ritual is your key to start the ignition of this whole journey, this whole process. Because what it is, there's a bunch of videos there I send you, and an audio technology. The audio technology takes you through a process of creating your future self. And it's a way to set up your field for the day that creates that and paints that image so that you can enter your day with the field and frequency to create the reality you want to create in the future moment of now. And then you're able to then hold that and then imprint your intent on existence rather than have your existence imprint its intent on you. So that's a great spot. And then, you know, you'll be on my newsletters. And so, you know, once a week I usually send something out, and sometimes it's, you know, personal, sometimes it's galactic, sometimes it's real world. And, you know, we'll be connected, and then just keep an eye out for things that resonate with you as I offer them. And then you'll be able to move forward from there.
Yeah. And I can say, you know, I'm sure you've heard the feedback, brother, that, you know, people probably open your emails much more frequently than they do other people whose kind of newsletters they're on. And, you know, for me personally, there'll be, sometimes I love engaging with the, you know, the big picture of what's happening in the world. And sometimes I love, like you shared, the journey of your new family home. Just it's wonderful to see an example of what can happen when we are really willing to do that work and to keep stepping forward in faith as you've done. So I really appreciate you providing that example.
Yeah, thank you, George. It's very beautiful. I mean, all I'm doing is authentically sharing, you know, and people, it's a story, right? It's our story, but it's also your story at home. It's the story of humanity's liberation of consciousness and the evolution from our planet to 3D density into 5D kind of unity consciousness as we're moving towards, and all the personal trials and tribulations and more galactic outplays and higher perspectives that are taking us on that transition. And yeah, people do say to me, I get a lot of emails, but I always read yours. So it's super nice. And you'll be on that, and you get the morning routine, you'll get started. And so, George, I want to also thank you. I'm looking forward to further collaborations. We did amazing work together in Mexico. I know that beloveds, one part, and Regan and I, have definitely formed a great relationship that we're going to be alchemize into frequency as the name of the event. You're definitely a part of that. We look forward to having you there, and of course on our neo-shamanic journeying, you're doing amazing work in the planet, and we are definitely going to set up that tour of Britain as soon as kind of things settle down a little bit. We will do the Celtic kind of journey through Britain, which you can help us with. So I look forward to that as well. So many intersections. There may even be a little visit for you to New Zealand for the kind of circle work we're speaking of. So many intersections to come.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Well, brother, thank you so much. And just stay on the call once we stop going live on Facebook. It'd be great just to say goodbye to you properly. And for those of you who have been watching, thank you so much. Please, if you've enjoyed this, if you've taken something from it, share this conversation around, because I believe this is a soul who is doing great service at this time. So please support our collective work by sharing this, letting us know how you felt about it. And as ever, stay sovereign, stay blessed.